I work night shifts at a local hospital lab, processing samples that come in at all hours. It's not what I dreamed of doing, but the pay is decent, and I've gotten used to the vampire schedule. By the time my shift ends at 3 a.m., I'm either completely wired from the constant stream of coffee or so exhausted I can barely keep my eyes open during the drive home. Last Thursday was one of those wired nights. I'd been slammed with work, a multi-car accident had the ER sending down samples all night, and I'd downed at least 4 cups of coffee to keep up. When I finally clocked out, I knew sleep was a distant possibility. My apartment is about 20 minutes from the hospital, tucked away in a quiet suburb. On my way home, my stomach growled, reminding me I'd skipped dinner in the chaos. There's this 24-hour diner called Mel's just off the highway that I frequent after late shifts. Nothing fancy, just good comfort food that somehow tastes better in the middle of the night. When I pulled into the parking lot, it was nearly empty except for a couple of cars, typical for that hour. I parked, got out, and headed inside, grateful for the warm air that greeted me. The place was mostly empty except for an older gentleman reading a newspaper, and a couple speaking in hushed tones in a corner booth. I took my usual spot at the counter and ordered a grilled cheese and fries from the tired-looking waitress. As I waited, I scrolled mindlessly through my phone, the fluorescent lights humming above me. That's when I noticed it. A black Dodge Charger with dark-tinted windows pulled into the lot, parking directly across from the entrance with its headlights still on. It just sat there, engine running. Something about it immediately set me on edge. I tried to focus on my food when it arrived, but I kept glancing at the car through the large front windows. After about 10 minutes, the headlights finally switched off, but no one got out. It just sat there, a dark silhouette against the night. By the time I finished eating, the car was still there. I paid my bill, leaving a generous tip as always, and headed out into the parking lot. As I walked to my car, I could feel eyes watching me from behind those tinted windows. My skin prickled. I didn't want to go straight home, still too wired to sleep, and now slightly unnerved. There's a scenic overlook about 5 minutes from my place that I sometimes visit to decompress after particularly rough shifts. It sits on a small hill and offers a perfect view of the city lights. During the day, it's popular with tourists and locals alike, but at night, it's usually deserted. As I turned onto the winding road that leads to the overlook, I checked my rearview mirror and felt my stomach drop. The black Charger had pulled out behind me and was following at a distance. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Plenty of people use this road as a shortcut. But the uneasy feeling wouldn't subside. When I reached the overlook's small gravel parking area, I pulled in and killed the engine. The lot was empty, which suddenly felt less peaceful and more isolating. I sat there for a moment, drumming my fingers on the steering wheel, debating whether I should just head home. Then headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. The Charger slowly pulled into the lot, parking about 30 feet away from me. The headlights shut off, but the engine kept running. My heart was pounding now. This couldn't be a coincidence. The overlook wasn't on the way to anywhere. You only came here if it was your destination. I fumbled for my phone and called my roommate Jacob, praying he'd be awake despite the hour. Miraculously, he answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. I tried to keep my own voice calm as I explained where I was and asked if he could come meet me. He must have heard the fear beneath my words because he didn't question it, just said he'd be there in 15 minutes. While I waited, I kept my eyes locked on the Charger. No movement, no indication of who might be inside. After what felt like an eternity, I saw another set of headlights approaching. Jacob's old Toyota pulled in, and I felt a wave of relief. I got out of my car and quickly walked over to his. Just as I reached for the passenger door, I heard car doors opening behind me. I turned to see 3 men climbing out of the Charger. They were all wearing dark clothes, and something about their synchronized movements sent a chill through me. They stood by their car for a moment, not speaking, just watching us. Then they started walking in our direction. Jacob rolled down his window. "Hey, you good?" he called to me, eyeing the approaching men. "Let's get out of here," I said, my hand on the door handle. Before I could get in, the men reached us. The tallest one, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up, spoke first. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" His voice was casual, friendly even, but it didn't match the intensity of his stare. "Yeah, we were just leaving," Jacob replied, starting his engine. "Already? But you just got here," said another man, shorter and stockier than the first. He had a tattoo creeping up his neck and disappearing under his jaw. "Why don't you stay and chat?" The third man circled around to the other side of Jacob's car, and I realized they were surrounding us. That's when I noticed the first man had his hand behind his back, like he was concealing something. "Actually," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "we're meeting some friends. They should be here any minute." The tall man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's funny, because most people don't meet friends at an empty overlook at 3:30 in the morning. Jacob revved his engine slightly. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice betraying a slight tremor. The men exchanged glances, and the tall one took a step closer. "We saw you at the diner," he said, looking directly at me. "You looked lonely. Thought maybe you could use some company." That's when I saw movement near the tree line behind them. A fourth man emerged from the shadows, holding what appeared to be a tire iron. My blood ran cold. Jacob must have seen him too, because he suddenly shouted, "Get in!" I yanked the door open and practically dove inside as he gunned the engine. The men jumped back as we peeled out of the lot, gravel spraying from beneath the tires. In the side mirror, I could see them rushing back to their car. "They're following us," I said, watching the Charger's headlights flare to life. Jacob took a hard turn onto a residential street. "I'm calling 911, I said, already dialing. We weaved through a maze of suburban streets, taking random turns, hoping to lose them. The dispatcher assured us a patrol car was on the way, but we needed to keep moving until then. After about 10 minutes of this terrifying chase, we spotted a police cruiser parked outside a convenience store. Jacob swerved into the lot, screeching to a halt beside it. The officer inside was startled, but quickly assessed the situation as we frantically explained. The black Charger never appeared. They must have given up when they saw us heading toward the populated area. The officer took our statements and descriptions, then insisted on following us both home to ensure we arrived safely. I spent the rest of the night at Jacob's place, too scared to be alone. The next day, against Jacob's advice, I went back to Mel's diner. I needed to know if those men were regulars there, if I should be worried about encountering them again. I spoke with the manager, an older woman named Rita, who had worked there for decades. When I described the men in their car, her face paled. She pulled me aside, away from the few customers scattered around the diner. "Those men have been coming in late nights for about a month now," she said in a hushed tone. "At first they were just customers, but then they started harassing one of our waitresses, Lily. She's young, just started college." According to Rita, Lily had rejected the advances of the tall man, who didn't take it well. He and his friends began showing up during her shifts, watching her work. Things escalated to the point where Lily filed a police report and quit her job. Rita thought that was the end of it until they started appearing again last week. "I think they're looking for her," Rita said, concern etched on her face. "The police can't do much since they're not technically doing anything wrong by eating here, but I've been documenting when they come in." I realized with a sickening feeling that I had been seated at the counter where Lily usually worked. From behind, with my dark hair, I might have resembled her in their eyes. I left the diner and drove straight to the police station with this new information. The officer who took my statement seemed more concerned now that there was a pattern of behavior. "It's been 2 weeks since that night, and I haven't seen the black Charger again. I've changed my route home from work and haven't been back to either the diner or the overlook. Jacob insisted I install a security system in my apartment, which I did the very next day. The police called yesterday to let me know they've identified the men based on security footage from the diner and my description. Apparently, the tall one has a record of stalking and harassment charges. They're increasing patrols in the area and have promised to keep me updated. I still work the night shift, but now I'm hyper aware of my surroundings. Every dark car makes my heart race, and I find myself checking my rearview mirror constantly. I don't know if I'll ever feel completely safe driving home alone in the dark again. Sometimes I wonder if they mistook me for Lily, or if they were just looking for any vulnerable person alone at night. Either way, I'm not taking any chances. Some nights, the darkness feels like it's hiding more than just shadows. The night has always been my sanctuary. Something about the darkness makes the world feel more honest. I've spent 35 years as a carpenter, but my true calling has always been solitude. My home sits on the edge of an old pine forest, just me and my cat Jasper since Eleanor died. The house creaks with memories, too many for one person to bear. But I could never leave the place where we built our life together. The kids visit on holidays, but they have their own lives now. After the stroke took Eleanor 3 years ago, Jasper became my only constant companion. Last Tuesday, after finishing my workshop, I decided to take my usual evening stroll. The property extends to the tree line, giving me enough distance to clear my head without venturing too far. The evening air was crisp, and Jasper followed a few paces behind, as he always does. I sometimes think he watches me more than I watch him. I've walked that same path countless evenings, but this time, as I circled back toward the house, something caught my attention. I looked up at the window of Eleanor's study on the east side of the house. Just for a moment, I thought I saw movement inside. I stopped and stared, feeling the hair rise on the back of my neck. Nobody should be in there. I hadn't touched that room since I boxed up her things. The thought of someone invading that sacred space filled me with a cold rage. I hurried inside, my hands shaking with anger rather than fear. When I reached the study, I found it untouched. Everything remained exactly as I had left it. I searched every corner, finding nothing out of place. I stood there feeling foolish, wondering if grief was finally catching up to me in ways I couldn't control. Yet something felt wrong, like an echo of presence that shouldn't exist. I tried to dismiss it as imagination. The following night, Jasper's hissing woke me from a shallow sleep. He never makes noise without reason. I lay still in bed, listening to the silence until I heard it. Soft footsteps in Eleanor's study directly above my bedroom. The floorboards have a distinct pattern of creaks I know by heart after decades in this house. These weren't random settling noises. I considered grabbing the axe from the woodshed, but decided against it. If someone were in my house, I'd face them with my bare hands. I took my flashlight and climbed the stairs, heart hammering against my ribs. Again, the room was empty, unchanged. My anger began dissolving into a gnawing unease. Something wasn't right in my home anymore. The third night, I came downstairs to find the porch light on, glowing against the darkness outside. I never leave lights burning. Eleanor's habit of conservation stuck with me long after she was gone. There was no denying it now. Someone was entering my house. I called the sheriff in a panic. Deputies arrived within the hour, searched every inch of the property, but found nothing suspicious. They were respectful enough, but I recognized the look they exchanged, just another lonely old man losing his grip on reality. By the fourth night, sleep had become impossible. I decided to check the study again, hoping to reassure myself. When I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. Eleanor's journals were spread across her desk. I had packed those away in the cedar chest in the attic after the funeral. Now they lay open, pages fluttering in the draft from the doorway. And then I saw her. A woman stood by the window, gazing out into the night. She wasn't Eleanor. Too young, too tall, but she stood in my wife's favorite spot, as if she belonged there. Terror and rage collided inside me. Without thinking, I charged forward. She turned and fled, footsteps pounding down the stairs and out the back door. By the time I reached the yard, she had vanished into the tree line. Jasper and I searched the perimeter, but found no trace of her. I didn't sleep that night. For weeks afterward, rest became a distant memory. Every creak in the house jolted me awake. I took to sleeping with the axe propped against my nightstand, dreading the moment I might need to use it. Each sound became a potential threat. I considered calling my son to stay for a while, but pride wouldn't let me. My father raised me to handle my own problems, so that's what I would do. But the nightmare continued. One evening, while sitting on the porch with Jasper, I spotted a figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching the house, watching me. It was her again. My heart nearly stopped. I grabbed the shotgun I keep for scaring off coyotes and marched toward her, Jasper darting ahead. She remained motionless, a dark silhouette against the deeper shadows of the forest. I fired once into the air, the sound cracking through the stillness like thunder. She turned and disappeared between the trees. The encounter left me shaken rather than relieved. I couldn't understand why this stranger had fixated on my home. On me? I stood at the forest's edge until darkness swallowed everything, waiting for her return. She never reappeared, but I sense she's still watching, waiting. I've reinforced the locks and windows, but I know deep down that determined intruders find their way in regardless. Living with this constant vigilance is wearing me down to nothing. Thank God for Jasper's company. His presence is the only thing keeping me grounded these days. If anything changes, I'll write it down. For now, I wait. I can't remember every precise detail, but some things stay with you no matter how much time passes. I grew up in Cedar Falls, Oregon, a town so small it barely registers on most maps. When you're from a place like that, you have to make your own entertainment. During my junior year of high school, my friends and I developed an obsession with urban exploration. We'd seek out abandoned buildings, forgotten structures, places with stories no one remembered anymore. It wasn't until years later that I discovered how many people are into that sort of thing. There was this old flour mill on the edge of town, about 2 miles down Blackwater Creek Road, 412 Millstone Drive. Funny how some details stick with you while others fade. The locals called it Blackwater Mill. We'd been there a handful of times before, and it had become our favorite spot for weekend adventures. One Saturday night in late October, 5 of us decided to visit the mill again. Me, Zach, Devin, Mia, and Trent. The temperature had dropped significantly that week, and I remember the way our breath clouded in front of us as we approached the building. Getting in was never easy. The property was surrounded by a tall wooden fence topped with barbed wire. There was one section where the wood had rotted away enough to create a gap we could squeeze through if we were careful. Trent had to help me through since I always struggled with that part. The mill itself was a 3-story brick building, with most of the windows boarded up, except for a few on the second floor that had been broken over the years. We would climb up a rusty fire escape on the east side to access one of these windows. Inside, the mill was a maze of old machinery, conveyor belts, and metal catwalks. The concrete floor was littered with decades of debris, broken glass, papers, empty bottles from previous visitors. The air always smelled like dust and mildew, with an underlying metallic scent I could never quite place. We had brought flashlights and a couple of bottles of cheap whiskey to share. Mia had also packed her portable speaker so we could listen to music while we explored. We headed to our usual spot on the second floor, a corner room that might have been an office at some point. It still had a desk and some shelving units. Devin was being particularly rowdy that night. He'd had a few sips too many and kept shouting things just to hear his voice echo through the empty building. I must have told him to quiet down at least a dozen times. I've always felt safer exploring with friends. The 5 of us had been doing this together for almost a year, and we had developed a certain comfort level with our urban adventures. We were about an hour into our hang when we heard it, a tremendous crash from somewhere on the floor above us. It sounded like an entire section of machinery had collapsed. We all froze. The music stopped mid-song as Mia fumbled for her speaker. "What the hell was that?" Zach whispered, his eyes wide. Before anyone could respond, Devin, Mia, and Trent were already scrambling toward the window we'd come in through. I don't blame them. The sound had been legitimately terrifying. But Zach and I hesitated. Maybe it was stubborn pride or genuine curiosity, but we weren't ready to leave just yet. We exchanged glances, silently agreeing to investigate. "It's probably just part of the ceiling giving way," I suggested, though I didn't fully believe it myself. We waited until the sound of our friends' footsteps faded before making our way to the stairs that led to the 3rd floor. Each step creaked beneath our weight, and I found myself holding my breath, as if staying quiet would somehow protect us from whatever waited above. The 3rd floor was darker than the rest of the building, with fewer windows to let in the moonlight. Our flashlight beams created eerie, jumping shadows as we moved forward, and then we found it. A large grain hopper had somehow been knocked over. It was massive, made of steel, and would have required significant force to topple. Around it was a circle of small objects that caught the light of our flashlights. "Are those coins?" Zach asked, kneeling down to look closer. They were indeed coins, old ones, arranged in a perfect circle around the fallen hopper. I picked one up and examined it. It was a silver dollar from 1921. But what really sent a chill down my spine was what I saw on the wall behind the hopper. There was a faded photograph nailed to the brick. It showed a group of men standing in front of the mill, all in work clothes from what looked like the 1920s. One face in the center had been scratched out completely. As I was studying the photo, trying to make sense of it, we heard another sound. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the other side of the floor. "Hello?" Zach called out, his voice wavering slightly. No response, but the footsteps continued, getting closer. That was enough for us. We turned and ran, not even bothering to use our flashlights. We stumbled down the stairs, guided only by the faint moonlight coming through the windows. I remember the panic, the feeling that something was right behind us, though I never looked back to check. We climbed through the window and descended the fire escape in record time. Only when we reached the gap in the fence did I finally turn around. There, in one of the 3rd floor windows, was a silhouette, the distinct outline of a person wearing what appeared to be a flat cap, the kind mill workers would have worn a century ago. I froze, unable to move until Zach pulled me through the fence. We ran all the way to his car, parked half a mile away, where the others were waiting for us, worried and confused. I've been back to Blackwater Mill only once since that night. The building was demolished 3 years ago to make way for a shopping complex. There's no trace of it now, just a parking lot and a row of chain stores. I've tried researching the history of the mill, looking for any accidents or incidents that might explain what we experienced. The local historical society has a few records, but nothing substantial. Sometimes I wonder if it was all just in our heads, the stress, the alcohol, the natural creepiness of an abandoned building playing tricks on us. But then I remember the photograph, the scratched-out face, the perfect circle of vintage coins. And I still have one of those silver dollars. I keep it as a reminder that some places hold on to their past in ways we can't fully understand.